I knew Keith probably relatively a short amount of time comparatively to the people that you're going to hear today. Extremely short, probably far too short, as most of us would agree. I met Keith some 8-9 years ago, my very first Comic-Con, whereupon I was bound and determined I was going to get work. I had my portfolio that was bigger than me, really, going through all the aisles of San Diego. I was going to get book work. I was going to just be fantastic right out of the gates. I was still a senior in college, right? Prime time. This is absolutely going to happen. And found that none of the book people had brought their art directors that year. I was carrying around a bunch of useless stuff in a bag that was really just pissing a lot of people off around me as I was smacking as I go down the aisle. And through the course of all this, stumbled literally upon Keith Parkinson's table, going, well, why isn't he at this table? Maybe he's just not here. And then I looked again, and I'm like, no, that's him. That looks just like the pictures I've seen. My God, I can't believe he's at this table. So I took this opportunity immediately, and was just like, he's got to see my stuff. I want to get the first critique I can get from this guy about all this. So I asked him, would you be willing to take a look at my work? I would really like any input you've got. Anything you're willing to offer would be fantastic. And he was sure, absolutely. Just throw it out. Let's take a look. So he kind of flipped through the whole thing. Anybody who's done a portfolio review at a con with an artist tends to get the same kind of yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay, and then you get to the end, and it's like, well, you're doing good. Keep on going. And I was just like, no. Seriously, lay it on me. I mean, I'm in art school. I'm taking critiques. I'm giving critiques. You can just say it. Just don't hold back, please. It's only going to be better if I hear the whole thing. It's like, all right, you really like Greg and Tim Hildebrand, don't you? All right, yes, I do, actually. I like them a lot. And he's like, and maybe a little bit of this and a little bit of that, too. Yeah, he nailed them all the right stuff. It's like, okay, there's not going to be BS in this one. So he had some very good comments going through and looking at your color, and we'll look at how you've got perspective and how you've worked in your foreground to background relationship. Okay, well, how do I do that? What's the better way to do that? Well, and started talking about grayscales and doing them a different way than I had ever learned them in school, and flesh tones and all these things that to another artist is just like hearing, the hand of God come down and write on the wall, this is how you do flesh tones. Absolutely, no problem. I'm going to take all these notes. He's like, actually, just give me your book. So he took my sketchbook and started writing a series of numbers in it, a series of grays, and a series of colors. Now, if you're going to get a flesh tone in, this is how you mark this. Match this to this. This one means this means that. And I'm just like, oh my God. This page is going to come right out of my sketchbook and be tacked to the wall on my table. And got to the end of all this, and he was so gracious and so overwhelmingly open, as Donato's already referred to, with all of this, that I think that was the first time that it had dawned on me that other artists typically are the most open people. The best artists are the most open people with their work and your work, and viewing it as such a thing that it is all a progression. It is all an evolution of you will be as good as, hopefully better than they are, at the time that you're talking to them. And if you're not, how can they get you there? And is there any way that they can help you find that? Because otherwise we feel like we're not doing our jobs as artists. It is one of the most self-fostered group of individuals I've ever seen, from lawyers to business people, whatever. It is only about the success of the genre, not the individual. And I think he truly embodied it in that point, in that moment. And from that point on, when I was teaching, would refer to these kind of moments that you'll have with other artists as being, these are the ones that you're going to remember. You'll remember very little of what I will say as an instructor. But when that person that really means something to you, you talk to and gets you the answer that is the honest one, the true one, the one that you want to listen to and want to hear because it's coming from them, that's going to be the one that you're going to remember. And I hope that artist that you have latched onto or really are inspired by doesn't do you wrong and doesn't prove that idea or that theory wrong. So at the end of this whole talk and looking at a lot of these things, I did probably the most fanboy thing I probably could have done in the circumstances, and was like, well, I really was wondering if you'd do a sketch in my sketchbook. And as soon as I'd said it, I thought, son of a gun, you just ruined that whole moment you had of getting all this good stuff by asking for this. And it felt like I wanted to take it back, but he was just like, no problem, man. What do you want? Do you want like elf girl? Do you want what do you? And I just thought back and I was like, I've looked at this man's work for a decade at this point. I was surrounded by it. It was all my my Dragonlance, my Dungeons and Dragons, all this stuff growing up. What do I want from Keith Parkinson? I was like, I want a tree. Give me the coolest tree that you just come up with on the fly. Just make one up. just go for it. And he started sketching this tree out, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting to see a lot of it. Which brought me to a lot of what I looked at in Keith's work, which was the reason for me he was the epitome of fantasy illustration. One of the people doing it that I aspired to be as much like as I could is that he was one of the few artists in the industry at the time, and I think since, and will carry on for a long time, if not forever, being, is that the fantasy didn't stop at the dragon, or at the armor, or at the magic that was happening in the scene. The fantasy part of it was the painting. It was the entire scene. It was the fact that, yeah, it's a forest in fall, and yeah, it's got some leaves and trees, but you're never going to see a forest like that. You're never going to see a tree like that. That's what makes this a fantasy painting, is that it's not just what's happening and the people occupying the space are fantasy-based. It's this whole world that he's created in his head. And you get one painting at a time that shows you Keith's fantasy world. And it's the one I wanted to live in and still do to this day. And I think that that was what drew me into his work from day one, and why I wanted so much to be doing that and doing those pieces and those paintings. So going on years later, I ended up getting to go to California GenCon 2 years ago. Met him there. Was a little less starstruck at this point. I could actually speak without stuttering, and I wasn't turning red, I'm pretty sure. And got to talking to him and chatting, and I was like, well, I heard that you got this job at a video game company. And I'm just saying, if you need work, I know Brahm has done some freelance stuff for you. Hey, if you need anything on the fly or whatever, let me know. I'm doing a bunch of freelance now, but I can always do some drawings or something if you need to. And he was like, yeah, sure, sounds good. So I gave him one of my sketchbooks, and just that was it. I'm never going to hear anything from this, but I wanted to offer at least the chance to do it. About 3 months later, I got a call on my phone at home, and I'm the only one home. My wife was at work, and I was at home painting away. And I, as I do, look at the caller ID, is this worth stopping a painting for? And got Keith Parkinson coming up on the caller ID, and I shook the phone. I was like, there's no way, this is really somebody's a prank call. So I picked up and was like, hello? Hey, Ben, it's Keith. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, what's up, man? And he's like, I'm over here at Sigil, right, as the art director. I was like, yeah, I was talking to you at GenCon guy. He's like, right. So hey, were you serious about the concept stuff? Would you be willing? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. What do you need? How many pieces? He's like, yeah, well, it's just, you want to bring your stuff down and you can show some of the guys here. So I was like, all right, no problem. When do you want to be in? About 5 minutes into this conversation, I realized Keith is talking about a staff job. He's not talking freelance. And I was like, okay, start over. Back up. So I'm going to be there the whole time? Yeah. And I'm going to be sitting with you working on concept stuff for this? Yes. You're the art director? Uh-huh. Okay, I've got to call my wife. And I'm going to get right back to you. He's like, okay. So I hang up. I called my wife and was like, okay, I'm going to quit the school and both teaching jobs, and here's why. So I went through the whole thing with her, and she was like, well, if we can do it, go for it. So I was like, all right, absolutely, I want to do this. So I ended up going to work at Sigil, which actually, if you don't mind, can you back up one?
Oh, back up, okay.
These are some of the founding members.